talk about what is it called? Dinos of Hindostan.
That's exactly what it's
I
called.
love the fact that you used the word Hindustan. That appeals to my evil Orientalist nature. Okay, here we go. Hello, this is Wazo X Wazo, Evil O, and welcome back. Today we are speaking with somebody I've known for quite a few years now. Met him in Penang, of all places, an incredible photographer, theorist, and curator in photography. And we don't do that many photographers here. He's come out with 2 books, more than that, but 2 books recently. Will My Mannequin Be Home When I Return Tonight, which is one of my favorites, but this is my absolute favorite, Pik-Nik. And we're speaking today with Mr. Arko Datto. How are you today, Arko?
I'm very good. Thank you. Thank you for your lovely introduction as well.
And you're coming to us from Kolkata today.
That's right.
And I really thank you for giving some time to me to do this.
My pleasure, absolutely.
Okay. So I think we should begin. I really like your books. I really love Mannequin, but I also really love Pik-Nik. And I wasn't really sure which one we should start with, but I think we'll start with Pik-Nik. So can you just go into a little bit how Pik-Nik came about and what was your approach and what is its theme? Would you like to start the discussion? Or should I ask you more pertinent questions? You can just start.
I think I'll clear your conundrum on which one to start with by saying that actually as projects, they both kind of started at the same time. So even though they look very different and are conceived in different ways, their timeline very much coincides. And thinking about it that way, the fact that they came out as books fairly together in the same year, roughly at a span of like a couple of months apart, is also testament to the fact that they had that sort of same timeline, right? So Pik-Nik is a project which has been, I started both of them in 2014. It's in January, and it's the year when I came back from my studies in Denmark. I went there for a year to study photography at the Danish School of Journalism. It was a great year, and I had a lot of these plans of what to do when I come back home to India. And
I didn't mention your education, but you studied in Denmark, you studied in Paris. You have quite the track record, and you actually studied physics and mathematics, which I find interesting. Well, yeah, but physics and mathematics, I mean, if you look at them on a conceptual level, there's beautiful aesthetics in physics and mathematics also. So I can see where you might come from that direction and move into photography, but we can talk about that later.
Yeah, completely. We can talk about that later, but that's, of course, there's something in there. So when I came back in 2014 from my studies of photography in Denmark, I really was looking forward to, I came back with a lot of energy. I had thought of these projects that I wanted to launch myself into. It was a new beginning in a sense. And so Pik-Nik and Mannequin both sit at that sort of juncture in my career, in my life, and Pik-Nik is a project to come back to. It's a project which looks at the phenomenon of picnic, which is, I call that a phenomenon because in Eastern India, it's sort of this it's an occurrence. It's something that happens in December and January. The only 2 months of the year when the weather is really not shitty, you can go out and like have a good time and, without getting drenched in sweat.
Right.
And photographically speaking, it's a great time because the light is super nice and it's very amenable to photography. If one cares for such things, of course, but
it's the only time I consider visiting Bengal actually is in January.
It's completely right. That's the best time to come. It's probably the only time to come. Yeah, you're true. You're right.
What interests me is that you did both of these projects simultaneously. But when I look at the 2 books, the 2 series have very different color palettes. in that Mannequin is very, I don't want to use the word garish, but maybe that is the right word, but it's very dark blues and bright oranges and bright pinks. But then Pik-Nik is very pastel and very soft. I wonder how you manage that, to keep those separate in your mind. If you were working on them literally at the same time or no?
Actually, yeah. I mean, if you see my projects, not just these two, but anything else, I really hate putting daytime and nighttime pictures together. So I kind of really distinguish. That's one like axis on which I conceptualize a lot of my projects: daytime and nighttime projects. It's like red wine and white wine, if that's a good way to talk
Right.
about.
Okay. Yes.
So Pik-Nik is the white wine, while Mannequin could be the red wine and that equivalent. Anyway, so so during the daytime while I'm working on a project like Pik-Nik or like climate change, at night I'm working in the same space, but the space becomes imbued with different energies, and there's a sort of in certain spaces, and then that becomes more amenable to a project like Mannequin. So essentially, what I'm saying is the same space would encompass multiple worlds, and in a space specifically like India, like Bengal, or even Bangladesh, where I've been working a lot recently. When the night falls, like you're in the face of like pretty intense darkness because the electricity is not all pervasive as it is in most developed places. So you're kind of face to face with very different worlds while standing in that same spot, and that kind of leads me to create that kind of disjuncture between the worlds that
So
inhabit.
the space and also the timing of the
Yeah, yeah,
activity
yeah,
dictates basically how it's approached and what's captured.
yeah,
Um,
yeah.
yeah. Okay.
Totally.
Well, let's get back to Pik-Nik. I interrupted you on
Sure, sure.
explaining that.
Yeah, so I think, I mean, so that I was very drawn to this idea of the Pik-Nik because the Pik-Nik became a very important part. It created a sort of, well, there was this one point where with my family, I was on a picnic outing on a boat, in one of these places, in one of these picnic spots. And this was while I was studying in Paris, and I had come back for like winter holidays for a couple of weeks. And the spot where we went, it's not very far from Calcutta. It's 2 hours away. Um, the boat, we were on this boat doing like a boat outing, and we realized that the waters were super choppy, and we immediately came back because it didn't seem very safe. And when we got back home in the evening, the news that was on all the television channels was of this boat that capsized at that exact same
Oh
spot,
no. Okay.
with 21 people that couldn't be recovered. And it was a real tragedy. And then I realized that there are like picnic tragedies. Picnic tragedies is like its own subcategory, but this particular incident that could very well have been me and my very close family members kind of left this sort of lasting impression in me. It left its indelible mark, let's say. And well, this was before I was even a photographer, but I think it took that time of that span of 6 or 7 years before that event could be turned, before that very personal memory of that event could be turned into a photography project
It had
or could
become
become.
part of your subconscious
Yeah,
and something that you needed
yeah,
to
yeah, yeah.
explore. Yeah. That's
And that's
interesting
why,
to
I mean,
hear.
that's how I think Pik-Nik became a project. I mean, it shouldn't have been a project, like it's just a very random thing to.
Well, that's one reason I like your work because, on some levels it's documentary, on some levels it's also political, but it always seems to come from a very personal space. Am I right about that? It
Yeah,
seems like it comes from a personal space, which I really love.
well, the thing is, like, I'm only working on my own projects, right? Like, I mean, I do some assignments as and when they come, but mostly I'm just working on my own projects, and I do them because they appeal to me in a very subliminal way, So it's only because I'm drawn to something, I just go and start working on it, and after a point, it starts becoming a cohesive whatever. But I'm drawn to things in a very intuitive, very emotive, personal level. So that's always the point of departure for most projects.
So the book Pik-Nik, though, is actually set in Odisha, right? It's not set in Bengal, or am I
Well,
wrong?
it's no, it's Eastern India, so it's a lot of Bengal, it's Jharkhand, It's
Okay.
Orissa, yeah. So it's a mix of
Okay.
it's in India. It's the region, yeah.
Not one site.
No, no, no.
And the thing you seem to be exploring a lot is the culture of, I want to say machismo, because it becomes quite a male world in
Yeah,
Pik-Nik,
yeah.
as opposed to, say, a picnic in France. It's no afternoon on the Grand, how do you say it, Chate or whatever. It's
Yeah, that's
it's a different
yeah, I think that's very
atmosphere.
interesting. You bring it up because going back to my, like I when I was a student in France, I think I used to go and visit a lot of the impressionists. Like, I mean, Paris is the place to go for that, and I took very good advantage of that. And this was again back when I was not really an artist. I was studying science, as you mentioned, and I ended up going to Musée d'Orsay and Louvre and Orangerie like a lot of times. And so that kind of like the idea of picnic being something that could be put to image started becoming, I think it also had its own germinating point there, point of departure there. So of course the picnic that you see in those images is markedly different from what we encounter here, but that's the beauty of India. Like, India has everything that every other place has, but they add their own twist to things, and it just
Wow.
becomes. So you have the same word, which is a picnic, but it's just this crazier, like it's and that's what's interesting. It's that disjuncture between the perceived sense of what that word is or what you would expect, and then what you actually see in a place like India that makes it very interesting. And of course,
I go on a lot of picnics here in Rajasthan, but we tend not to call them picnics. We call them whiskey parties, generally.
I mean, yeah, yeah. I mean, that's where the one, it's called a picnic here, but I mean, that's essentially what it is for the majority of the cases as well.
Right.
So, yeah, for the overwhelming majority, of course, there's exceptions and there's really sweet picnics as well, where, like family comes. And I mean, it's a spectrum. You have everything ranging from like boys' hostel parties to like the workers' unions, from suburban towns to the party, like the local political party office going on a picnic outing, to the hospital grade group D staff going on a picnic, to like the family. So it's a full spectrum, and I think that's very interesting to me, that this concept of the picnic sort of straddles this entire strata of like various groups or various, and they lead to their own group dynamics, of course. And sadly, overwhelming majority of that happens to be very male dominated picnics, but that's also a testament to the fact that, like in public spaces, it's always the men who end up getting more prominence in, especially in more boisterous scenes, of course. And
Well, India is
uh,
still a pretty strong patriarchy, in that way.
yeah, so yeah,
And
and even more so now.
I
So
just read your blog post that you had posted the other day about I think it was a sexual assault, a minor, I don't know how you would word it,
yeah, yeah, yeah,
at a picnic in Odisha, I think, and the tide had
yeah,
gone way, way out. And then there was sort of
yeah,
some
yeah,
local justice involved with some people encircling
yeah,
them. And you caught that in your photographs. But I was just
yeah.
thinking, in these environments, you kind of get into how people behave when there's no authority around, and it becomes almost like just local interactions, local justice. I
Yeah,
found
so
interesting on that level.
I think it's the French would have a word for it. It's called exutoire, which
Okay.
means it's a release. It's an échappement. It's a outlet. And the picnic, in a majority of the cases, is a space for this outlet. It's a release valve. So I've encountered people who've said that at the end of the day, we will have a fight, and if we have another group to fight with, that's well and good. But if not, we'll fight within ourselves. But we will fight, and then we'll go back, because we need to fight. We need to get that energy out, and I mean, India is becoming a space with rife with this pent up energy on multiple individual and group levels, and that has its own ramifications, as we keep seeing every day, day in, day out. And the picnics become a space wherein you can see this energy, this very sort of hidden male energy being finding outlet. Yeah,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
completely. Yeah.
Did I read something, or was I confused? I thought I read something about Picnic maybe being translated into a film of some sort.
You're completely right. It's
Okay.
yeah. So I mean, where do I start on that? Well, so I mean, for me, it's a long-term project, right? And a long-term project is kind of like your child, like your. I mean, I'm not a father, but I guess my projects would be, you know, the closest that I have to, having kids, and they transform with time, right? So it started off as a photography project, and then I kind of realized that there are various things that escape the photograph, escape the still image. And just to give an example, like there's a group of guys who are dancing to a techno trance remix of a genocidal song, which says that Muslims should be chased away from this country and they should be sent to Pakistan. That's the essential wording of that song. And these guys are dancing to that song at a beautiful sunset, And if you take an image of that as a photograph, you get a group of boys dancing at a sunset. But if you take if the video would, so that is a cultural image, but if you translate that into a video, it becomes a political statement, right? So,
yeah, the audio gives a whole cultural context,
yeah,
and political context,
and the way the people are dancing to those words, so they're reacting to what's being said. So it just creates a whole layer to it. Just adds these various layers to the project. So I mean, gradually I started realizing these things, and the idea took form that the picnic that I was looking at or studying photographically was a socio-cultural phenomenon, but there are all these political components that can only be reflected in video. So basically, for the last 3 years, I've been actually with my very modest team. We've been going out and shooting footage to create this sort of. I mean, the form keeps changing, etc. But essentially, what I would call a documentary, what I would call an experimental essay film, essentially. So it's not really a documentary. So we're trying to, we are refining what it would.
when can we look forward to the completion and the release of that?
Well,
Pretty open-ended.
2022 is the planned.
Okay.
We still have a bit of way to go with shooting and editing and refining the way we are seeing the work. And essentially, we plan to shoot for these 2 seasons. So the coming season in 2 weeks, and the next year as well. So one pandemic year.
Picnics will continue even the course of the COVID crisis, then, huh?
Well, so that's what's interesting. So we, given the innate optimism that Bengalis have in this part of the world, they will go to picnic because they went for the puja festivals. They were celebrating out on the streets, and there's no reason to not expect picnics. And that's very interesting for me because the picnic by definition is opposed to the idea of social distancing. Like they don't go hand in hand, they're enemies, like they are antagonists one to the other. So but they will both coexist, and it's that sweet spot that I'm hoping to find ample evidence of, let's say. And yeah, let's see. It's all, I mean, that's the beauty of like working this way. We don't know what to expect. We can just end up getting a lot of really exciting stuff, or there might be nothing. So
sounds like I think you'll find lots of stuff to document.
Hope so. But also a film is a complicated space because it involves a team, so that involves multiple, more precautions that need to be taken, especially during a pandemic. And like it's various degrees of care and precaution and that we need to take to realize an artistic vision. So there's multiple steps before it happen.
Can we move on to your Mannequin book a little bit?
Sure, if you wish.
And this is like, I'm just going to flip through. Of course, I'm going to insert images into a finished video. Okay. I look over here because I have a bigger screen on this side. I see better what I'm doing.
Okay.
That's why I'm not like ignoring you. Just so you know, I'm looking at the bigger image. But I love this feel. I mean, I hesitate to use the word, but there's something sleazy about this book. Because it's nighttime and it's carnival and there's crackers and there's people who are looking sweaty. And what was the concept behind Mannequin?
Well, actually, to be honest, to start with, there was no concept, and that's where that work started, because I was like the work with Pik-Nik. I was actually working I still have been working on this project on the river Ganga. So it's kind of like my mother project. It's been ongoing forever, and it's like the edit is huge. So I don't even know how to bring it down. It's just growing and growing. But while again, I was working on that during the daytime, and I thought, okay, well, at night, while I'm doing this more sort of constructive work during the mornings and the afternoons, why not do something at night where I just go and explore and see, like what's out there without really any preconceived notion. So it was an empty space to begin with. And of course, there's a way of looking, there's a clear vision in the sense of in the sense of what I'm drawn to and how I photograph, so that you see through the work. But to start with, it was a sort of space of with open-ended meaning and open-ended possibilities, let's say. And that's how I started. The work started around the river Ganga, which of course has ended up becoming a very political point of contention in current world. The work started in contemporary India, I meant. And the work started again in 2014, the same year that the BJP came to power. And, it kind of like the timeline of my sort of starting to really develop serious work in India. I was doing other stuff before outside India. And that kind of coincided with the rise, or not the rise, the validation, the political and electoral validation of the right wing in India. And what so that of course left me with a lot of possibility and potential to explore, and I've been trying to do that ever since. And So Mannequin became one of my really important projects along that line, because I kept the space very open, but like with Pik-Nik, as we discussed, like the space is very it's laden with political meaning, and that political meaning stems from society, from cultural understanding. It's built from all these various layers of engagement and various layers of complex meanings and interactions. And that night space kind of became codified with all these things that we are looking at today, so just to give examples, like I found a lot of these in that book. You would see a lot of images of trucks on the highway which have been broken down, or like there's a truck where the sign says danger and it's like blinking, and it's very ominous. And I mean, it becomes ominous when you think of the you're in Rajasthan. I mean, that's like the space where a lot of these lynching incidents have happened, and the trucks that have been accosted on the highways. And I mean, while I was not shooting the images thinking of that, the images kind of grew in concordance with the times that we were living in. So in a sense, looking at it in retrospect, it became a sort of symbol of the zeitgeist, the time that we were living in. And the work started sort of amassing, let's say, these various various meanings and the symbols and the iconography of the contemporary times we live in India. So there is, for example, an image of this man holding a child but with the head covered, and it looks like, I mean, I'm very worried of being lynched when I go to remote India to photograph on suspicions of being a child smuggler. And
Oh, really?
I am. I mean, there are places where these are big problems, and it's happened in Orissa. It's happened.
So simply because you were an outsider, they would think you were a child smuggler, perhaps?
It's very possible in today's world. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Wow.
And I mean, nowadays, like, you keep facing questions like, why have you come here? And like, it's nighttime already. You should not be here. These
Can
are
I tell you something? When I used to travel with my old assistant Shrinu, I mean, 20 years ago, when I had too many children bothering me in the bazaar, sometimes Shrinu would tell the kids, "This is the man who kidnaps little children and eats them."
Well,
And they would all run away. I guess those weren't good jokes to make.
not sadly not anymore.
Yeah.
So yeah, and rumor spreads very fast in today's world because of what it's enabled by WhatsApp and other forms of social media. And in a
Yeah.
country like India, where the mobile penetration, thanks to geo network, has been all pervasive, so people, they might not be able to have access to healthcare or roads even, but they have 4G to like run their data through. So
Right, right, right.
and this rumor machine has been especially very well developed in this country for a few years now. And so these are, I mean, so just to come back to Mannequin, like an image like that becomes laden with meaning for me.
Right.
And I mean, also like other like, so the work kind of started um, becoming premonitory of the times we live in. Another great example is the image on the cover. If you would like to, show it to the to our viewers, like what you see on the cover is a bit complex. Like it's a layered image of two. It's an image with a pregnant goat, which forms the bulk of the image. On top are these flies that we took from another image to sort of create this interlaid layered image, and then there's a symbol on top, which is an esoteric symbol that we developed language for in the book that you see later on. But what's interesting is the day that the book was published, I went to a party later on in Calcutta, and the book was being printed in Italy, and we were doing it, via distance, and at the publishers in Lartiere, and and then somebody here told me like, oh my God, like, did you hear about the news today? This pregnant goat got uh, gang raped in Delhi, in the outskirts of Delhi,
Oh
and this
my
was
God. Yeah.
2015. And I was like, what are you even saying? And I was like, I just printed my book, and the cover has a pregnant goat. Like, this was today, and we with my designer, very talented Swiss artist Nicholas, like when we were doing the book together, we kind of felt that this image should be there on the book cover, but it was more intuitive. And then in the end, like it became very much, very much symbolic of the day and the time that it was printed in. It's just
Well,
very,
the
it's a,
title of the book itself seems to be very laden with suggestions of sexual frustration, with the reference to the will my mannequin be home when I return tonight.
well,
Um,
it's a mix of many things. So I've just kept it very open ended. It's something that came out from looking at the work over a long period of time. And yeah, I mean, the mannequin is also the symbol, like the Hindu gods are mannequin, the Hindu gods and goddesses are also, the idols are mannequins, right? So there are many ways of like looking or, trying to find meaning in the title. So
yeah, I find it interesting in India because speaking in generalities, but when Tommy and I first came here, because India was so much more repressive when it came to sexuality than the West,
yeah,
because
yeah.
they never seemed to have gone through the sexual revolution. There did seem to be just so much sexual.
I don't even know what you're talking about. Yeah.
You don't even know what I'm talking about.
I mean,
But it always seemed like it was just under the surface, ready to explode,
sure, sure.
is what the
Yeah,
point I was trying to make, you know.
of course. Yeah,
Whereas in
yeah.
the West, it's kind of like it's become so out of the open, it's really sort of out of control, in my opinion. And it becomes so commonplace, people lose interest in sex actually because it's just so out there all the
Yeah.
time.
Yeah, I mean that's the big problem in India right now. Like it's being like the government has been introducing even more repressive measures, which just always have the opposite effect, and probably that's also intended. So like it's a very murky space, and in all of that, like you were talking about normalization, and you have things like the IPL cheerleaders who are like that kind of came and burst upon the scene at that very point of time as well. Like. 8, 9 years back. And I mean, I just feel like India was not ready for looking at like being fed with constant images of cheerleaders on their screen for like their entire evening. It's not something that should have happened, but because
You
because
mean when
the
the cable television and the satellite TV came in?
I mean, after that, like once the
Yeah.
IPL, the cricket, like cricket, and sort of this entire, the way they shot the camera angles, the way the entire photography and cinematography happened around that. I mean, it was just a very messy space that kind of, I feel that it normalized, legitimized a lot of things, I mean, which was not done in the right way. So
Right. I mean, I remember the days, Tommy and I went far enough back, we'd remember the days when it was quite common to see, like 20 people gathered around one house that had the cricket game on television because there was only
sure, yeah, yeah,
one television in the village, or even in Mapsa in Goa, you'd go to the market, everybody gathered around watching the cricket game on one TV. And as everybody started getting connected and everybody started getting, connected on their mobiles even, um, God, everybody was just deluged with all this commercialism and sort of Western decadence, I want to say. very, very quickly, you know.
Yeah, yeah,
And
yeah.
of course, that had a huge, huge effect on the culture.
I think so because cricket is like a religion in this country, and like everybody watches whatever format goes on, and like whatever format the game appears in, and that has its own subconscious repercussions for sure.
Right.
Yeah,
So anyway, it seems to me like these two books too, they work together much better. Like when you first look at them, realize they were produced during the same time period. They seem rather incongruous, but actually they fit together very well because one is sort of a very daytime view of life, which is a little bit more domesticated and sort of, the boys out on their own, but
yeah,
with
yeah,
other boys. And then at night, you've got who knows what's going on at night.
yeah, yeah.
It becomes much more chaotic, even than the picnic scenario.
I would also add that like these are two books that have come out, but there's other stuff on the way. So I think in a few years' time there would be a more sort of like it would be easier to understand where all of it comes from. Like you're getting right now glimpses into two things that happened at the same time, whereas there were other projects that were also which will come out as books with time. So some years down, I think there would be a clearer picture of where all of it sort of stems from.
So
And
let's just talk. I don't like these to run too long. So I'd
sure,
love
yeah.
to speak with you for an hour and a half, but I don't think I really should. Um, so what's going on with the Chennai Photo Biennale? You're one of three curators, right?
I'm one of four curators.
Oh, four curators. I'm sorry.
Yeah,
One of four
yeah,
curators. And they just announced the theme the other day. I was
yeah.
watching
That happened.
that. Yeah.
Yeah,
And that's going to be something to look forward to.
I hope so. Yeah.
Yeah. You don't want to speak much about it at this point. I
I
get
can,
that.
I can, I can say the little bit that I mean, we were supposed to have the Biennale was supposed to open yesterday, technically and originally, but because of the pandemic, we had to shift it by a year. So now it's going to happen in December 2021. So we had our first unveiling, in a sense, the first look at a list of artists, an initial list of artists. So we are still developing that, and there would be more names added. And it's the website is out there, and there's also like we made a like this Chennai Photo Biennale team made a video with like it's beautiful with all the names of the artists, and so we also like the Zoom preview should be up very soon, which discusses some of the curatorial complexities and questions, and talks about the plans, and it should be on YouTube very soon. So
The Zoom
hopefully,
preview was very interesting. It was quite good, I thought. And what's the theme again?
it's called Maps of Disquiet.
Maps of Disquiet. Yes, I do like
Yeah,
that.
thank you. Yeah.
Rather open-ended, but it's also quite suggestive, you
Yeah,
know,
I think that's the
like
kind
it.
of things
And
that's what a good name should.
it sounds like it fits the times because our times right now are so disrupted and disruptive and disrupting,
Yeah,
oh,
indeed. Yeah,
you know,
totally.
everywhere around the world.
Yeah. So we are. I mean, that's the curation is meant to like we intend to the look at where the world is headed in different ways, of course. And I mean, we were planning to do that, and then the pandemic hit. So in terms of curation, it's very interesting because we are also sort of in like developing it real time through this pandemic. So it's a bit of a challenging process, but it's an interesting. Hopefully, we'll
It,
be able to.
just before we end this, I want to ask you a much more broad-based question. I don't get many photographers on this channel. I talked to Mohammed Mustafa and I talked to Yannick Cormier, but not that many. And this is common, you've heard this question before, but I just like your take on it. In this day and age when everybody's got a camera in their pocket constantly and we're so deluged with images, what is the role of a photographer and photography in this day and age? What separates what goes on at
Well,
the
I mean,
Chennai Photo Biennale from what you see on Facebook, I guess I'll say. Let's put it that way, or Instagram.
Well, I mean, the camera is a tool, and
No.
everybody has right to the tool. And the camera in today's world, the camera enabled via smartphone, is a beautiful tool, and I'm very happy that it has that sort of democratization where anybody and everybody can use it. So But that doesn't make everybody a photographer, just like being able to calculate numbers doesn't make you a mathematician, you know? So it's one of those things. So, I mean, we are professionals. We work, we develop things using photography. We propose ways of seeing to people. We look at the world and we construct our very specific views on that, and we help people to see the world in new ways. And that's not what everybody and anybody and everybody is doing with the camera as a tool, right? So I think that distinction is very important. Not anybody with a camera can be a photographer or an artist. And but also, like, I mean, I don't want to be very I'm essentially not very protectionist about any of these things. Like, I'm very happy that people are being able to use the camera, being able to use the apparatus, which is the camera. And it makes it way more interesting because anybody and everybody will have a say on what you're doing, and that's beautiful. And that makes it all the more challenging as well. It helps to keep, you're not performing in any exclusivist domain anymore. You are sort of open to, you know, and that's where I think photography should be. It's very different from a lot of the other artistic mediums, and one reason is that it has this overarching reach and accessibility to people, and that's the beauty and the strength of photography. And yeah, I intend
Still
to
has
sort
to
of,
be conceptualized in some way.
of course, and not
It
everybody's
has to
doing
be.
that.
Not everybody can. Do you
Yeah,
credit your training in physics, your interest in physics and mathematics, to somewhat developing your ability to conceptualize?
I
Or
think
do
it
you see
comes.
it as, nah?
No, I think it's very important. Is one thing is it kind of helps me, like in physics or math, mostly mathematics. Like, you would be developing theories, which are sort of, you build them up. Like, each theory could be very independent one from the other, but they have their own sort of cohesive internal logic, their own set of axioms, right? So my projects are like that. Each of them are very different one from the other. You could argue that they are very different one from the other, even though, like, somewhere down the line they're not. But on the face of it, they look very different. They are synthesized in different ways, but they have their own, like, they have their own cohesive internal logic, and that's how I
Well,
look at
yeah,
them. They
my
are their own
brother
sort of.
was heavily into physics and mathematics, and he wasn't really
That's
into
nice.
art at
Okay.
all, but he would often use the word beautiful when talking about equations or proofs. He said that is just a beautiful equation, you know, that it was just like so
Yeah, yeah.
logically perfect. Um, and I think a lot of artists don't understand that about people who are into mathematics and physics or even the sciences, that people do have a sense of beauty in those disciplines.
I think to take from this very particular example that you mentioned, like in physics or mathematics, like a lot of the time your search is for a very perfect, lucid formula or equation at the end of, like, going through years of research. And in photography or in art, like, I'm working a lot with installation work right now as well. So it's not really limited to photography or video in any way, you know. I mean, it's just, I mean, my practice itself has been sort of enlarging in different ways. But a lot of the time in various projects, for example, in the Rail Diwali project, where I work during along the rail tracks at night during Diwali, very simple premise, but it's only 3 years down the line after doing the project. I started doing the project because it felt right, but only after 3 years did I find the very perfect, clear, lucid answer to why I was doing it, you know? And that kind of, that brought it all together. But a lot of the times it takes time to arrive at that. But it's also, I would say, that's very akin to like how a researcher would look at or approach their research
Were
or
you
their
doing that
the
for
problem
National
that they want.
Geographic, or who are you doing that for? Or was that an independent project? Hilda
I
Valley.
was doing it for myself. I
Doing it
was
for
I was
yourself.
doing
Okay.
it, but
Okay.
then it's been published on National Geographic. It's been published in a
Okay.
multitude of places. Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
But yeah,
Arko, you're an amazing man. I would like this to go on for 2 hours, but it probably shouldn't, because I know people don't have long attention spans. So
that's
thank you.
very kind of you.
Thank you. Is there anything else you want to say at all?
Well, I think you wanted you had the dinosaurs in
Oh,
mind. If you,
dinosaur.
I think
Yes. Let's talk about, what is it called? Dinos of Hindustan.
that's exactly what it's
I
called.
love
Yes.
the fact that you used the word Hindustan. That appeals to my evil Orientalist nature. But
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's
you need to spell it with two
well.
O's.
Yeah, I mean, I thought of it. Maybe at some point. It's not set in stone yet, but yeah, why not?
Tell us about Dinos of Hindustan. That's a fun
Well,
project.
I
I
mean,
enjoy
essentially,
that one.
well, that's it's also my most political project, but it also goes back to Mannequin as the first work that looks at the night, and the dinos of Hindustan essentially looks at these dinosaurs which kind of started appearing in the Indian subcontinent fairly recently, like as an over explosion of like statues and whatnot. And yeah, I've been trying to hunt them down. A lot of people have been very generously helping me, providing me with insights and inputs. It's a really crowd-funded project. Like
We have some
I
roaming
share my
around
things.
Udaipur. I told you we've got a couple in Udaipur.
You've told me,
They
yeah. I
their
can't wait
natural
to.
habitat is the other side of Lake Pichola. There's a small
Well, I can't
family of
wait to
them
go and
there.
visit. Yeah,
Yeah.
I'll
And
be
they
on that very
nest, they
soon. I
have
hope.
eggs. They have eggs.
Beautiful. I mean, that's what you need.
Yeah, just like Jurassic Park
Uh,
3, I think it was. We have eggs here.
yeah, well, the eggs are also being stolen from Indian museums, so that's also a big thing.
Are they really?
Yeah, yeah. So there was a museum in Madhya Pradesh which had its eggs stolen, and that news found its way into the project. Like the project looks at, I mean, the project
Wow.
kind of, it's a project where I write a lot. So you have the photography, which kind of is follows the way Mannequin has been produced, but there's a lot of writing involved, and there's a lot of creative writing. It merges science fiction, fantasy, natural sciences, biology, contemporary politics, quantum mechanics. Like it just brings in a mash of like multiple
All
things.
the photos have political captions.
They do,
They
yeah.
all have
So
political, and you're a good writer. You
I mean,
know,
I'm trying my best. Thank you so much.
I know you're a
There's
good writer.
a long
I'm
way to go.
impressed by
So
the things
that's
I've read of yours. Hmm?
thank you. I mean, there's a long way to go. So
So basically,
good.
you're taking aim at the Modi regime dynasty right now. Yeah.
I mean, it's, I would say the right wing ecosystem is a prime point of contention in a lot of my work. But I mean, it's also like the enabling of a survey in society, which was actually started by the Congress. And, like the Modi government just took all the bad things and then, they just started, jumping on just exacerbating existing fault lines. So it's, I mean, the dinosaur also in the project is a multifaceted symbol. Like while you have the T-Rex, which could be a symbol of tyranny or terror, you also
Got it.
have like very happy looking brontosauruses and like stegosaurs, and which end up being victimized. So the dinosaur also, like I just feel like in India right now, like the middle class is very happy that everybody else is getting victimized and they are not being touched too much. Let's say, I mean, but it's not very far off that they would also be equally brutalized by this regime. So, I mean, just to come back to the project, the idea of like who is the enemy or who is the victim is also, there's a very fluid line. You cannot really create these binaries anymore, and this
Well, I
project,
think it changes over time.
it does as well,
I
of
think
course.
politically, all political reigns, whether they're of the left or the right, eventually become rather corrupt. And eventually there's needed some sort of an overthrow, a revolution, a change, and
Of
then the
course.
process starts again. And personally, I theorize why in this day and age, everything has become so intense and polarized is because with the rise of technologies and especially surveillance technologies, that people on both the left and right realize that this might be the last battle for a long, long time because whoever can seize control of these technologies is going to be ensconced in power for a long time. It's going to be much more
Yeah.
difficult to change. That's one of my observations, if you want to call it.
Well, the good thing is also that a lot of this technology has a very strong democratic aspect to it. So while the BJP started off with this fake news, like peddling fake news and sending it through WhatsApp, like all the other parties have caught up and now they're also equally, doing it.
Adept at
So
it, yeah.
or countering it. So both of that. So it's a matter of, I mean, that's a good thing. Like different people also have access to it, but of course, if you come with huge amount of money and the infrastructure, you can pull off in a better way. But resistance, like we can see with the farmers' protests right now, there is an extremely strong resistance movement that's taken off from the grassroots in a beautiful organic way. And I think that's where we are headed. And that's really, I'm very optimistic about these things.
I'm pretty optimistic as long as the internet remains relatively free, but I'm very afraid of the internet becoming controlled.
I'm sure technology, like there would be some other ways to bypass that, and like we'll see.
I hope so.
Yeah.
Anyway, we don't want to end on too pessimistic of a note.
Of course. Yeah.
Okay, so I'm going to say goodbye. Arko, thank you for joining Evil O. And people, please, if you enjoyed this, please like and subscribe, or like and subscribe that way. But please do that. It helps the channel a lot if you do. Thank you, Arko. Thank you, everyone. And until next time, this is Evil O from Udaipur.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Arko.
Super nice seeing you as well.